Hey everyone, I'm Max. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be building a custom 3D printer cart for the new Bamboo P1S I just got. I wanted to do this because I was using one of those Ikea ALEX like rolling carts. It worked fine. The issue was everything was closed and I couldn't really see what was in the drawers. So as I've gotten more filament, it just kind of ended up being impractical. I couldn't really see what I needed. I was always like opening every other drawer just to see where all my stuff was. So I wanted to build something custom, something that would also put the printer more at eye level so I could get up there and work with it more easily instead of being punched over. So that was important. I also just had a sheet of plywood I wanted to use and just have something custom that I made for myself. So we're going to be building that today. We are doing a bunch of DIY and hobbyist cabinet projects on this channel. So this is one of our second videos. We're going to be doing a lot more. And the goal is to just get you excited about building custom cabinets yourself. I'm not a professional. I'm just a hobbyist. I've been doing this for a little over a year. I love building cabinets. Cabinets are really expensive to buy or to pay someone to build, and learning how to do it is a huge cost savings, and it's also just a lot of fun. So that's what we're doing on this channel. If you're interested and you want to see more content like this, hit the like button, subscribe. Would love to see you in the comments as well. So for today, pretty simple materials. We have one sheet of plywood that we're using, that's it. And I am using a pre-finished birch plywood, 3/4 inch, and it's an 8x4 sheet. And I got this for another project and I ended up not needing it. So it's been laying around in my garage. I want to use it. And I got this from a local plywood supplier, and I'll put it on the final cost of the project at the end. But I would recommend, if you're going to get plywood for a cabinet, go find a local supplier in your area and see what they have, because the pricing is often better than Home Depot or whatever you have near you, and the quality is much, much higher. The stuff at Home Depot is absolute garbage. I know because I use it every once in a while. I've built a lot of drawer boxes with their plywood that's supposed to be cabinet grade, and it's barely cabinet grade. So find a supplier, get some sheets yourself, much, much better. But use whatever you have, whatever you want. So we're doing that. In terms of, we also have casters, I guess, to roll the cart around. And then I did get some edge banding to make the cut edges look really nice. So that's all in terms of materials. In terms of tools, I use a track saw to cut down all my plywood, and I do it on a Bora centipede table with the tabletops that they come with. This is a really nice and convenient way to work with plywood in your garage. The centipede table collapses down when you're done. But use whatever you want. If you have a circular saw, that's great. This is not really like a high accuracy project. And if you have a circular saw, maybe you got like an edge guide, and I'll link one below. That could be a good option for cutting plywood in your house. But I would always recommend getting a track saw. It makes your life so much easier. And I also have some accessories for the track saw, which I'll show in the video. And then I did do some edge banding, which I'll show, and I just used an old clothes iron. So pretty simple project in terms of tools and materials. So let's get started.
All right, before we jump into the actual building of the cabinet, I want to show you the design I put together in Fusion 360 for this cabinet. So I put the actual sizes for the P1S and the boxes that you get from Bamboo when you ordered the refills and the kind of the spools for filament. So on the bottom, the idea was you'd be able to store multiple different filament boxes, 3 deep, and however high you want, because the shelves are adjustable, but I just did 3 high here. So this is 48 boxes stacked. So tons of storage, and you could put a trash bin or anything on that top shelf. And after doing the design, here is the cut list that we have of the cuts that we'll make on the plywood. This is from Cut List Optimizer, a really great tool to actually generate the sheet of what you need to cut. So if you want to follow the plans, pause here and you can basically make these exact cuts on your own plywood, and you've got the exact pieces that I used. All right, so when we go to work with plywood, the first thing that we need to do is actually go and remove the factory edge on the sheet. So you'll get a sheet from a supplier, and that edge is just probably not usable. It's not straight. It's oftentimes there's staples and all this crap on it. So we go and we cut that off so we get a really nice clean reference edge. And then we know that edge is straight, and we can use it to cut nice clean square pieces when we go to do the rest of our cuts. So I'm just removing that edge here. And unfortunately, I don't have a long enough track, so I kind of have to do it twice, which is really annoying, but works just fine. And I've got a nice clean factory edge that we can use to make the rest of our cuts on. All right, so the next step is to make the rip cuts for the project. And so the way we usually do, or the way I've been processing plywood, is I do all my rip cuts first. And so rip cuts being the length of the board. And then I'll take those pieces and I'll go to a different tool, which is my multifunction table, and I'll make all my cross cuts there. So you don't have to do it this way. You can cut the board however you want. This just saves me a ton of time. I find I can get more repeatable cuts like you would be able to on like a table saw. This is kind of replicating that for doing all my rip cuts. So this is a tool from TSO Products called the TSO Parallel Guides. Amazing accessory if you're doing a track saw. All right, so we're making our first rip cuts. Again, I don't have a long enough track, so I kind of have to move it every time I cut it. Not ideal, but it works totally fine, and the pieces that you get are really nice and straight. And we'll go ahead and do it on the other side too. And so these cuts basically are filling most of that width of the board. We'll have nice, even, equally matched rip cuts, which is what these parallel guides are so great for. All right, now that we've done that, I take the boards over to my MFT, which is really just another table that has some accessories for doing crosscuts with the track saw. You don't need to use this. You could just make your crosscuts using like a square guide back on the other table. I do this because I just get cleaner cuts. I like using it. You can also, if you're doing lots of cuts that are supposed to be the same size, you can set a stop so you can have nice repeatable crosscuts. But here I am just cutting the rest of the panels for the top, the sides, and the shelves. Once we've got the panels cut, we need to add shelf pin holes to the sides. So this is how we're going to have the shelves supported. I debated making these fixed, but ultimately I wanted the flexibility to move them up and down if I wanted to change what I was storing on the cart. So I use this Craig jig shelf pin driller. It works okay. I try to make sure that I start at the same point on the bottom because you want all the holes to line up. And then when you do the other side, do the same thing. The nice thing about it is you can make all your shelf pin drill holes and then use an index pin they give you to actually anchor on the bottom to make the rest of the cuts. So then all the pins will be equally sized apart, which is really, really important. So nice little jig. It's not my favorite. There's some things about it that annoy me, but works well for this, and it's just tedious. Got to make a ton of little shelf pin holes, but that's the Craig jig. I'll link it below. All right, once we've got the panels cut, we can move over to actually assembling the box. So I've got these Rockler 3/4 inch corner clamps, which are really useful for actually assembling boxes. So I put them, each panel, into the clamps, and then I can orient them how I want to orient them. One thing about building a rolling cart is you're going to have a lot of weight being distributed down from the side panels. And so unlike, say, like a kitchen base cabinet where you have a toe kick and something on the bottom to support the box, with this you don't. And so I like to build it so the side panels are inside, And so the weight will transfer down to the bottom panel instead of how I would do like a base cabinet for a kitchen or something. I would do the tops on the top and bottom on the inside of the side panels so you don't see that edge. But I think this is much more structurally sound when you're building something like a rolling cart. So here I am going and doing the screw holes. I'm doing a very simple construction for this box because I didn't want to have to take a lot of time for this. This is supposed to just be a one single day project. So what I like to do with this is I do brad nails to keep the box in place. And the really nice thing about brad nails is I can just push the panels around and the brad nails flex. So I can get them aligned really, really easily. So it's become one of my favorite ways of doing this type of construction is do the brad nails first, drill my screw holes using countersink drill bits, and then screw them on. You get a really great result. All right, so after we've done that, I moved on to edge banding, and this was a mistake I made. I should have edge banded the panels before I put the box together because this is so much more difficult, and you get this weird overlap on the corners. Created a bunch of work for myself, but edge banding is really simple. I got some pre-finished 3/4 inch edge banding. It's already sanded and it's got a lacquer on top, so it'll match the rest of the box. Saves me a ton of time for something like this. All you do is lay it on. I like to use the iron to get it kind of glued in place, and then I go back and I rub a piece of wood or something to really get it to seal and lay flat. And here is where I made a mistake, and I had to redo some of this edge banding because I kind of accidentally cut into it and it looked terrible. So I took the edge banding off and redid it. Another nice mistake. But you can see this technique here. I glue it on, just kind of get it in place. And then I'll take something like a piece of wood and I'll go back on it to smooth it down and get that thing really nice and sealed. And then I use a tool that I got, just a Rockler edge banding tool where I can pull it and cut all the edge banding straight. Because I didn't do the panels on their own, I have to go back and kind of slice some of the edges. Now we move on to putting the casters on. Pretty easy. I just like using a ruler guide to make sure I'm in like an inch on each side. Go through and drill all the holes and screw them in. Make sure I don't punch through the box. These casters can support, I think, something like 450 pounds. So plenty of weight, plenty of support that they can handle. All right, and now we need to cut the back panel for the box. Pretty simple. I just used my square guide for the rail and just did 2 cuts, one lengthwise, one widthwise, just to get the panel the right size. And here we're going to take the box down, and we're definitely not going to drop the box and hit our camera and cause it to fall over, right? Right? Oh. Oops. Yeah, turns out pre-finished birch is extremely slippery, and I should not have tried to carry it like that. It slipped, the box fell, knocked over the camera, knocked over my track saw, but magically everything was all right. There's some gouges in the panels, but again, who cares? This is not a really serious project, so I moved on. Not a big deal. Here I am testing the shelves just to make sure they fit right. Everything was nice and square thanks to using those parallel guides and the square guide. So everything fit nicely. You could see the box is racking like crazy though, and it's not stable at all. We will fix that in a second by putting on the back panel. So I got my foam board and flipped the box over to lay it down and took the back panel I just cut and laid it on. And this is where you can square up the box. So you'll see that box was racking like crazy. It was not square at all. Once I got the back panel on, I'm checking the box to see how square it is. And it was not square. It was longer in one diagonal than the other. And so what I did was I took the back panel and I lined it up on the top of the box first. And I used brad nails to kind of secure it in. And then I was able to shift the box and kind of rack it to get it square. And so you'll hear people say the back is really how you pull a box into square. And this was a really good example of how that works. So I secured it on the top and then pulled the box into square and then secured the back panel to make the box fully square. Took out my ruler, measured the diagonals to make sure they match. They did. You know, if you got plus or minus a millimeter or two, it's not a big deal. Now I'm just securing the back panel using countersunk holes and drilling in some screws. Now that that's done, we lift it up and we can admire our hard work. Finally, here is the box in all of its glory, down with the printer on top. We've got 3 nice shelves. We can put whatever we want there. I've got my current filament supply down there. You can see a mixture of some of the boxes I haven't opened, some of the refills that are still in the package, some spools I already have. And so as my collection grows, hopefully this cart will become way more useful than the old Alex drawer. So hopefully you enjoy that and you go and build your own custom 3D printer cart. All right, let's look at the final cost for the project. One 4x8 sheet of 3/4 inch pre-finished birch plywood. I spent about $70 on. I had a 4x8 sheet of 1/4 inch MDF for the back panel. That cost me about $26, even though I only used a small part of it for this project. 4 casters cost about $15. The edge banding was $30. I used very little of it. I still have a ton left. A box of screws that I used for this project was $11. The shelf pins were about $5. So total, you could look at it between $120, $150, $160, depending on whether you are going to use some of this stuff for other projects. Now compare that to what I was using before, which is the Ikea ALEX drawer unit, and that's about $200. So I think that's looking like a win to me. Thanks.